How's it going, Giants fans? Welcome back to Fireside Giants with Alex Anthony, still over across the pond in London, having a fun time drinking beers and eating fish and chips. But today I'm talking about a little bit of gas for the Giants. Russell Wilson, the new quarterback, going to talk about him and obviously other playmakers on this team, notably Cam Scadaboo. And I'm going to let Anthony do the Scadaboos. He is the professional. He is the best at the Scadaboo screech. And I'll tell you what, this Giants team should be, and I'll say this should be, and on paper, are significantly better than what we saw last year entering 2024. Daniel Jones, I mean, he's a backup quarterback at best. Obviously, Drew Lock, backup quarterback at best. And, Tommy DeVito is now on the practice squad again, where he probably belongs. And I want to talk about Russell Wilson. I know a lot of people think that Russ is washed, and yeah, he's not as good as he used to be. But if washed is a slightly above average quarterback in the NFL, I aspire to be washed one day. That is a pretty damn good place to land if people think you suck, slightly above average. Obviously, he used to be he might be a Hall of Famer. He used to be a perennial Pro Bowler, but as age takes its toll, 36 years old, and obviously moving around the different systems and whatnot, he's declined. And I think that naturally we shouldn't expect him to be this superstar player anymore. However, as Giants fans, guys, let me remind you, and I remind myself of this all the time, the Giants haven't had a competent quarterback in a really, really long time. What it feels like to see, what it feels like to experience competency at the position is not something that we have experienced in 6 years, like straight up. It's been a really long time since we've seen a player that can hit the deep ball, make the checkdowns, do the necessary stuff to just be average. Inconsistently average. Daniel Jones had games where he was like, okay, this guy could be a star, and then he had 10 games straight where like, this guy is the worst player I've ever seen in my life. They do not have that situation with Russ. He's going to be better because he's more consistent in a lot of different ways. Now, we know his strengths and weaknesses. His decision-making at times has been worse in recent seasons, but not nearly what we're used to, like significantly less worse than we're used to, or better rather. And I think that Russell Wilson brings something that the Giants desperately, desperately need. And Brian Daboll, he said it before last year. He said, we need to be more explosive on offense. And what does more explosive mean? Well, you get Malik Neighbors, and that helps a lot. But being more explosive means throwing the ball downfield, completing passes 20-plus yards downfield. It means hitting the deep ball consistently. Russell Wilson is a player that is going to capitalize on those opportunities basically whenever he needs to. If there's a play schemed up for him and the concept has a guy going deep and that guy is open, which the Giants usually have a lot of guys open downfield, Daniel Jones just missed every single one of them. This is a guy that's going to hit those passes. We're talking about an extra 2 touchdowns a game maybe. Brian Daboll is a very, very solid offensive coordinator. He just had to rip out half his playbook last year because his whole game is predicated on the deep ball and explosive plays and keeping defenses on their toes, and his quarterbacks literally could not hit the passes. So, that is something that I think, just looking at the season ahead, is going to be a lot different. I think a lot of people are going to change their opinion if they don't think Daboll is very good. I think that it's going to be a much different experience altogether. But let me give you some stats into why I think Russell Wilson is going to be just a breath of fresh air. Even though he's past his prime, even though he's not as great as he once was, this is still a substantially better quarterback than what we've experienced. And I think that we forget what that looks like. 20-plus yards downfield last year. Over 50 attempts, he completed 27 of them. A 54% completion rate. Let me just give you some context here. Drew Lock's completion rate was 54% last year or something like that. Russell Wilson has a similar completion percentage on only passes 20-plus yards downfield. 7 touchdowns, 851 yards, 2 interceptions, with a 1.8% turnover-worthy play percentage. That is insane. The fact that he doesn't take any really crazy risks downfield, it shows in his ability to make the right throws and obviously complete them. This is a very, very good player. This is a very good player when it comes to throwing the ball down the field. And when it comes to the medium portions of the field, 10 to 19 yards, 61.7% completion rate, 573 yards and 7 touchdowns. The short stuff was inconsistent, 80.4% from 0 to 9 yards, which should be higher. Behind the line of scrimmage, only 81%. That should be more like 90+%. So, he did struggle in some ways last year in the shorter portions, but the deep ball is still there. That is still his MO. And, a lot of people say he doesn't throw the middle of the field very much. And, I'll give you some stats there too. Intermediate middle of the field, 370 yards and 3 touchdowns. to the right of the field intermediate, only 177. To the left, only 26. So when it comes to intermediate throws, like 10 to 20 yards from the line of scrimmage, he actually had the most yards throwing to the middle of the field. He also had the most yards throwing short center of the field. So the idea that he can't throw to the middle of the field, which, I feel like is disproven based on his Hall of Fame pedigree. The stats suggest otherwise. So he's going to be able to do those things, the dig routes. Darius Slayton's really good with the dig routes. And maybe we get value from Jalen Hyatt. Maybe Jalen Hyatt isn't just a complete bust and he does make an impact positively in 2025. I mean, it's been 2 years. He took a huge step back last year because we had no quarterback that could throw the deep ball. And his entire game is predicated on run straight, like 9 route, go, fly, do your thing. That is what Tennessee did with him. That is what his role was. That is what his role was supposed to be here. And the Giants haven't had the quarterback play to actually maximize that, right? That's partially why they wanted Matthew Stafford. He had the touch. He had the deep ball. Like, he had all those traits. They wanted Aaron Rodgers. They know he has the deep ball. They know he has that touch. Russell Wilson was plan C. And it's not a bad one because he is probably one of the best, if not the best, deep ball passer in the league. It's the other stuff that has taken quite a dip. His decision making at times, he's still kind of mobile. I'd say he was like average mobility, maybe slightly above average, but nothing. You're not going to really lean on him to run like you would with Daniel Jones. But that's fine. Like, I'd rather my quarterback be passing anyway than running all the time. That obviously increases injury risk. So, Russell Wilson is going to be really fun. It's going to be kind of crazy to see how different this offense is entirely, though. Cam Scatterbo, who I want to talk about too, this is a guy who had 1,712 yards and 21 touchdowns last year for Arizona State. Now, I know it's college, but it has to be kind of impressive that opposing defenses knew Arizona State's entire offense is going to be run the ball with Cam Scatterbo. And anyway, despite the fact they all knew that, they still couldn't stop him. This is a guy who had, I think the last 3 games of the season, a minimum 140 yards on the ground. He had over 500 receiving yards with 3 receiving touchdowns. Good hands, doesn't drop the ball a lot, doesn't fumble a lot. 1,700 rushing yards is like a number that doesn't make sense. I don't think he's going to do that in the NFL. But look, the Giants, and Anthony, talked about this the other day. He asked me, on the overreaction segment, do you think that the Giants could have 2 1,000-yard rushers? And I definitely think Scatterbo could hit 1,000 yards. I definitely think that. Tyrone Tracy might be a little bit more difficult. I don't think that workload really fit him well last year. I think it was a little bit too much because he didn't have that type of workload in college, and I don't think that he was ready for that, but the Giants needed him. So, he had to step up, and I respect him for that as a 5th rounder. So now they can have a nice platoon. They can lean on the hot hand. They can use them out of the backfield. Tracy is known as a receiver despite all the drops last year. I think that will get cleaned up. And Scatterbo is very, very underrated as a receiver as well. And, that's going to be fun to watch. That dynamic young duo on rookie contracts and running back, cost efficient, cost effective, and very, very productive. So receiver, obviously, that's kind of the position I'm a little bit concerned about, actually. Aside from Neighbors, Slayton's good. He's a low end WR2, and the Giants paid him that way, in this market. So he's getting low end WR2 money, maybe like mid tier WR2 money, and then obviously behind him, there's not much. Like you have Hyatt, and then who? Like, that's kind of the situation. Wan'Dale Robinson's in the slot, obviously. I like Wan'Dale. I think he's a good player. I think his catch radius is tiny. I think, he's limited in a lot of ways, but he's a good chain mover. He can haul in receptions. He's good enough hands. He's had some drop issues. So the Giants have a couple of receivers who do have drop issues. Even Neighbors dropped a couple passes last year, so they got to clean up that for sure. But Russell Wilson throws a really, really good ball to catch. And I think that's something that kind of goes underrated. He's going to put the ball in the right place, and it's going to be lofted in there perfectly. Like, he throws a very catchable football. So I think the Giants will have an advantage in that way, and the receivers will benefit from that. But this is going to be a very interesting offense because it's going to be predicated on establish the run with Scatterbo and Tyrone Tracy, and then play action, take shots downfield with Russell Wilson and the deep ball. And it's going to work a lot more than I think many people are giving it credit for. Now, I'm not sitting here and telling you Russell Wilson is like a superstar. I'm not sitting here telling you that anyone on the Giants, aside from Neighbors, is a superstar at this point. What I am saying is that we are so, unused to seeing competency. It's going to look like night and day. An average offense for the Giants we would be like drooling over an average offense for the Giants. And at least that's a step in the right direction. And Jackson Dart was one of the best deep ball passers in college football last year. So having Russell Wilson to learn from when it comes to throwing the deep ball this year, don't under kind of appreciate that, because he's going to just be sitting there watching, learning, getting the tendencies down, getting the timing down, getting the fundamentals down, the technique and everything. That is, if there's anyone to learn who to throw the deep ball from, it is Russell freaking Wilson. Jackson Dart just gets to sit there, soak up all that information, learn the offense, take the shots in practice, kind of do his thing, maybe get a chance at the end of the season, who knows, and just prepare. And that is a really good situation to find yourself in. So I do think the Giants have a pretty good structure and foundation built out for the future. The question is, can the coaching staff maximize the talent? That's the biggest concern, not the talent itself. I think we have so much of it. Carter, everybody, there's so much talent. Can the coaching staff maximize it? That's a concern for me. Can the offensive line stay healthy? Another concern for me. And if Neighbors, anything happens to him, you're really in trouble. The Giants don't have enough receiver talent. So, but again, and I've said this recently, I do see this year. I don't think it's what you call a transition year, but what I would say is you're kind of transitioning to Jackson Dart. You're kind of setting the foundation for the future. And I do think that next year the Giants will go hard in either free agency or the draft to land a big time receiver. And I don't know, they'll have trade capital. They want to go in that direction. They could trade draft picks. You could sign somebody, whoever hits the open market. You could try to do that. You could draft the best receiver available in the first or second round, another option, but they are going to address that position next year, because it is, having that number 2 star next to Neighbors is an embarrassment of riches. And that is what you need to maximize a young quarterback like Jackson Dart, who is trying to find rhythm, trying to have trust and chemistry in the NFL. And I completely forgot to mention Theo Johnson too, who, low key, I do think could break out this year if he stays healthy. He was bulldozing people at the end of the last season before that foot injury. He was absolutely rocking tacklers, and he is a tough guy, tough dude. So I really, really think that he is a player that will shine this year, and a player that we could see bubble to the surface as not just a key contributor, but a huge red zone threat as well. And he's fast, man. Like, he could be a seam, like, kind of tank monster for Russell Wilson. So there's a lot to like about this offense, and I think that the Giants are making good strides, and it ended up being a lot better than I thought it would be. I think you guys would probably agree. We were pretty pessimistic heading into this offseason. The Giants have turned it into a pretty solid haul, pretty solid turnaround. But we've seen this story before. We've seen exactly this all unfold before. And I think that the Giants have to prove it to us before we can fall into the, yes, we're going to be good trap. I think that we are going to be better. I think that we have the chance to be good, but I got to see it first. And I think that as a Giants fan, you guys probably agree with that. We got to see it first to believe it. And once we see it, though, then we can start to buy into this process, buy into this game plan, and buy into this strategy. But at the very least, on paper, it looks good. It looks better. The stats support it. The players support it. And it definitely feels a lot better in terms of just the aura and energy around this team right now. So, guys, always happy to hear your thoughts down below on Russell Wilson. I know there's a lot of negativity about him, but let's just be happy we have a quarterback that can actually hit the deep ball. How about that? Let's just stop there. Guy can hit the deep ball. We're already going to score more points. We can just stop there. Russell Wilson is not supposed to be the long-term solution. He's just supposed to keep us competent until we can transfer to Jackson Dart. So let's just appreciate he's actually elite at something and not an absolute bum who just is the dumbest player of all time at times. I do think that I'm pretty happy, pretty optimistic, pretty positive going into camp, and obviously the next couple of months as we lead up into the season. But we'll be here every day for you guys and doing more live streams soon enough when Anthony gets back from London. So appreciate you guys hanging on, and hopefully the members are appreciating the early drops on the channel. But much love as always. Make sure to hit like and subscribe. Drop a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify for us, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.
Perfect.